It's the biggest game in the Big 12 to date this season, but it also might be the biggest game in both programs' histories in literally decades. This is a crossover with Locked On Cougars and Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars and Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast focused on all things BYU and Texas Tech. I'm Jake Hatch, host of Locked On Cougars, longtime radio producer in Salt Lake City, and obviously your host here on Locked On Cougars, covering all things BYU. Across from me digitally is my man, Chris Level, host of Locked On Texas Tech, but also the man of many talents, calling basketball games, football games. I don't know what else you're doing, Chris, but it feels like you're a man of many, many talents. So, thank you to everyone for making these your first listen of the day. And more importantly, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share them with your family and friends, and help us continue to build these respective audiences as we talk all things Red Raiders and Cougars. All right, Chris Level, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about the nature of this game. Two top 10 teams squaring off in Lubbock, Texas, College GameDay in town. We'll talk about some of the players we expect to be influential figures in this, and then we'll also get our predictions ahead of this game. But I want to start you with this, Chris Level. I've got an argument that at worst, this is maybe top three in terms of the most impactful and biggest games in BYU football history. Where does it stand in Texas Tech's greatest games ever?
Yeah, Jake. Well, first of all, I appreciate the time with you. It has to be really maybe the biggest game in 17 years. Okay. You know, I mean, there's been some other. You started out 7-0 in 2013. You went to Oklahoma. It didn't go well. That was probably a big one. It didn't go well in Norman that day. I think the game against Colorado last year was pretty big because you were still very much in the hunt for the Big 12 title game. But this is a bit different because of the context that goes with it. I think top 10 matchup and the fact that you're kind of in a control your own destiny mode, which these other times maybe not necessarily so. And I'm referencing back 17 years ago because that's when number one Texas was here. But then you played a top 10 ranked Oklahoma State team the very next week. And so, but that gives you an idea, though. It's been a minute, certainly. And this is, and I got to tell you, I would have pinned down this Texas Tech season in the summertime by saying I thought trips to Salt Lake, I thought trips to Tempe, and I thought trips to Manhattan, Kansas. This is back in July, August. That was going to determine your season. I said all along, you have to win one of the three. You may have to win two of the three. You've won two of the three. And I thought, if you do that, you may be good to go. But little old BYU out there in Provo, man, said, I mean, because the quarterback situation, you didn't know what you didn't know. And old Kalani Sitake and Bear Bachmeier, man, just rolling. And what are they, 19-2 in the last season and a half? So, yeah, work's not done for the folks in Lubbock at all. And Coach Sitake, in my opinion, with what we know right now, I mean, he's probably Big 12 Coach of the Year. I just don't know if anybody really saw this coming, picked middle of the pack, and you know, and here they are undefeated, and they are tops in the rankings and everything else.
I don't need to remind Cougar fans of this, but it might be of note to Texas Tech fans because BYU has been at the Power 4 level now for this is their third season, Chris, now at this level. BYU's been ranked in the top 10 multiple times. They've won a national championship, but they have never once in 100+ years of playing football, Chris, played in a top 10 matchup with the other opponent being in the top 10. This is some history for the Cougars. And to your point, I think that there is an excitement factor to all this because BYU, once again, for the second straight year, has started 8-0, and it's back-to-back season starting 8-0 for the first time in program history. Life's pretty good in Provo, Utah, but the angst about this game against Tech, it's absolutely real.
Well, I think what's happened is that these two teams have played their way into a conversation where most are going to say, and I'm not stating an obvious here because I think it's reality, that these are the two best teams in the league. I think that, Utah is right there, although both of these teams have beaten Utah. Mm-hmm. I think, that you've got an Arizona State and a Cincinnati kind of conversation, but Arizona State's now without their starting quarterback for the rest of the season. Cincinnati just got hammered by these same Utes. And so to me, it's really Texas Tech and BYU that are, I don't know if it's head and shoulders, but they're on a different tier than everybody else. And that folks may not agree with that, but that's my reasoning. And again, Arizona State beat Texas Tech. And I think but you had your backup quarterback playing in that game. You were on the road. I think Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson played unbelievably great that game. And you led the thing with 2 minutes to go and just couldn't hang on. But yeah, I think that's the scenario that all roads lead to this.
What is the impact of having College GameDay in town going to mean for this? Because BYU's had Game Day in town a handful of times, same I'm sure with Texas Tech, but it's been a minute, as I understand it, since ESPN has rolled in.
Yeah, well, you had Big Noon kickoff here last year for that Colorado game. Game Day has not been here since that Texas game in 2008.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, that's when it was, and which ironically enough, that's the last time you won in Manhattan, Kansas, was that particular year. There's a direct correlation in winning these tricky games and tough games that allow you to play these bigger games. And look, it's good for the program. It's good for the league. I think it's fun that the ESPN folks finally are showing some notoriety to the Big 12 Conference in back-to-back weeks. It allows everybody's story to be told and be showcased and on a bigger stage. And it's a big deal. With an 11 a.m. kick, you're going to have the show outside the stadium, and then halfway into it, I think they move inside the stadium. So not really sure how that will work. But I just, Pat Mahomes is going to be here as the guest picker. I think he's trying to bring his buddy Andy Reid. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. But yeah, it should be a lot of pomp and circumstance for sure. But that's what we love about this stuff. And it's good for the Big 12 Conference. You don't get many of these opportunities, and it all kind of has to fall right. Nationally, each opponent in this game had to do their part for it to kind of to allow this to happen. Because if Texas Tech was playing UCF this weekend, Game Day's not here. But BYU's undefeated, and it allowed them to make a decision like, hey, if Tech wins at Kansas State, this is what we're doing, and this is what happened.
Well, and that's the thing, as I had it on very good authority. Once Texas Tech, I was told, if Texas Tech takes care of business at Kansas State, Game Day is going to Lubbock. That was really the only holdup as to why they hadn't announced it at that point. Well, you know what? 31 second half points. All of a sudden, College GameDay is making that announcement that they're going to the Red Raiders and Cougars matchup down here in Lubbock. Now, the other thing real quick on this, Chris, in terms of just the magnitude of this, you mentioned the fact that you believe that these two programs kind of a cut above the rest of in terms of the Big 12. Regardless of the outcome, neither one of these programs are going to find themselves on the outside looking in with regards to the Big 12 title game, because if you look at the odds, whoever wins is the odds-on favorite to be in Arlington. But the other one, it drops to like the high 60% chance of them also showing up in Arlington. So this could be a preview of a rematch just a month later.
Yeah, man. I think – yeah, so this is Texas Tech's biggest test remaining on their schedule is this particular game. They've got a game at home versus UCF, then they have a bye week, and then they travel to Morgantown, West Virginia on Thanksgiving weekend. Obviously, BYU has got a tricky game, I think, at home versus TCU, and then an interesting one in Cincinnati. Cincinnati, that's kind of a must-win for them after their loss in Salt Lake. So. But I don't disagree with your premise. This could absolutely be the first of two games between these two teams.
Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. All right, there are some influential players on both sides of this game, Chris, that are going to ultimately play a role in the outcome. As we all like to say, coaches call plays, but the players make said plays, ultimately determine the outcome. We'll talk about some of the headliners, guys like Baron Morton, LJ Martin, and some guy they call the Bear. Speaking of Bear Bachmeier, we'll get to all that as we continue on with this crossover edition of Locked On Texas Tech and Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with our friends over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game and you want to ride the hot hand in the game, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you even combine your live bets to a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout along the way. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push in the game. Right now, new customers can get $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. As simple as that. Put down $5 if it wins, $300 extra to play around with our friends over on FanDuel. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Texas Tech your first listen of the day. I'm Jake Hatch. That's Chris Level. We are your respective hosts of these two fine programs, and also looking forward to this game this weekend. All right, Chris, I'm going to lay this out here. We're going to kind of go back and forth on this with regards to players that we figure will have a major impact in this game. But I want to start with your guys' signal caller, and that's Baron Morton. He has been knocked out of multiple games this season, and now that Will Hammond has gone down due to a very unfortunate ACL tear, the situation is that Baron Morton's got to stay healthy. It's essentially for Texas Tech the rest of the way here. What is your confidence level that he's kind of put the injury concerns behind him and he's going to be capable of leading Tech to where they want to go?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much of a plan B from the standpoint of they're just going to do whatever they have to do to keep him healthy, right? I mean, and it's the same injury that he's dealt with the whole season. It happened in the first game, oddly enough, and maybe they should have sat him down a bit early in the season, but you've got all this pressure and all these expectations, and I think you wanted to get off to a hot start. And Coach McGuire talked about when we want to keep him in rhythm, and we want to really keep, Baron, you're learning a new offense to a certain extent, and he goes to Salt Lake, and he can't really slide, and he takes a few shots and leaves that game. Hammond comes in and played great. I think in the Kansas game, kind of a re-aggravation, so they sit him down for a couple of weeks. He could have played after just 1 week off, but they just decided we're not going to do that. We're gonna try to get an extra week because Oklahoma State was that second game, and I think they thought, let's just be smart. Let's play for the big picture. So he's still, I don't know, at some level dealing with it. But I just think his presence is big for this football team. His experience, his leadership, all those intangibles. And, yeah, he can make a lot of throws and all those things. But I think that just QB1 being back was a big lift for everybody before you go to Manhattan, Kansas. And I think it played out that way just, again, by him being out there. And he obviously played pretty well too. So we'll see what it looks like, but yeah, you gotta protect him, keep him healthy. You're not going to see him run much. He tucked it and ran a few times in Manhattan, but not going to major in that at all. And with that, you're going to have to tell me the whole Bear Bachmeier thing, because what is fascinating to me, Jake, is that you're going to have somebody chasing him around in this particular game named David Bailey. And if Stanford doesn't fire their coach back in the spring, this defense and your team and offense, it could look very different. And it's very ironic. And I think David Bailey leads the country in sacks with 11.5. And yet I'd be willing to say that BYU may have gotten the better end of that deal, because you got a true freshman that's playing great.
Well, yeah, it's crazy to play the what-if game because, yeah, had Stanford not made the move that they did, Bear Bachmeier might be the starting quarterback for the Stanford Cardinal. David Bailey still coming off the edge for the Cardinal. Who knows what Stanford looks like in that circumstance? But alas, it's where we are today. And BYU has been absolutely lucky to have landed on what Bear Bachmeier has kind of evolved into here, Chris, because, and we're going to get to LJ Martin here in a moment. I know you got a big question about his status. We'll get to that momentarily, but the offense for BYU's really been predicated on run the ball downhill and play action off of it. And Bear, the nice part is having that has allowed him to really settle in and learn this offense and the nuances of it over time. When LJ Martin went down in their last game early on in that one at Iowa State, all of a sudden the entire game was essentially put on the arm of Bear Bachmeier. And he had 7 games of seasoning to that point, and all he did was go out there and generate 350 of the 400 yards that BYU generated in that game, and almost single-handedly willed them to that victory over the Cyclones after they started off very, very poorly on the road. So it's been absolutely remarkable to watch kind of his rise here, Chris, because the future looks extremely bright with him under center, because it doesn't feel like he's reached the peak of his powers. But we're talking about, as you mentioned, a true freshman. He's now playing his 9th game coming up against Texas Tech, and who knows what the ceiling is for him.
And it's the biggest reason why they're undefeated.
It is.
I mean, and why a lot of people, shame on me, kind of weren't real sure about BYU in the summer,
Well, and to be fair, at that point in the summer, Chris, nobody, I'm telling you myself, I go to practice every single day. I could not have told you that Bear Bachmeier was going to be what he was. He showed promise in training camp. Trust me. We saw throws from time to time during the portions we got to watch as media members. They're like, okay, that kid's got something. But for what he's accomplished, leading BYU to an 8-0 record and a number 8 ranking, none of us saw that. So don't feel bad.
Yeah, but it's been – this is the beauty of sports, man. You just don't know what you don't know sometimes, and that's why they play it out, and guys emerge, and then some guys that you think, oh man, this is a no-brainer, they're going to be awesome, and they're not as good. I mean, that's the beauty of this stuff. Take me through the LJ Martin scenario. This is a former Texas Tech commitment, originally from El Paso. So Texas Tech fans are very familiar with this player. He played against the Red Raiders a couple of years ago, obviously, but he is the leader of that backfield. So what happened in Ames, and what do you think going forward here?
So early on in that game, he dropped his shoulder on a run at the sideline, and it didn't seem that egregious of a hit at the time, Chris, because a lot of running backs will dip a shoulder on a guy. You take the hit on the shoulder pad and you kind of glance off. Well, all of a sudden he gets to the BYU sideline, says right on the sideline there, and you see him kind of after a moment here. It's like all of a sudden, ooh, that doesn't feel right. So they very quickly get the trainers involved, and they take him back to the locker room. The broadcast from Fox, who did the game, said he had X-rays on that shoulder, and they ruled him out very quickly after that. It's been essentially mum's the word, it feels like, since then, because nobody really wants to fess up to anything, as you might imagine, and we'll have to wait for the injury reports to see what happens. But we'll see. He is the linchpin that makes this BYU offense go. Without him, I have a hard time seeing how BYU generates really any consistency in the rushing attack that's going to keep Texas Tech and guys like David Bailey from pinning their ears back and going after Bear Bachmeier. I'm sure that they've spent the last week and a half, 2 weeks preparing something in the case he's unavailable. But if he's capable of playing, they need him out there, because he has been absolutely remarkable. He's kind of come into his own this season after dealing with injuries his first 2 years. And if he's healthy, it completely changes the complexion of this BYU offense.
And take me through other playmakers. I know. Obviously Parker Kingston and Chase Roberts are the two outside guys, if you will. But just kind of take me through where else you turn to make plays, so it's not all on the quarterback.
Well, the two other guys I would mention in the passing attack are JoJo Phillips. He's coming back off of he's had a broken clavicle for the past 6 or 7 weeks. He got injured early on the season. They expect him to be back this week, and that obviously helps out the wide receiver position, because he's a legit 6'5" burner, can really enhance that passing attack. But the guy I've been absolutely floored by, just his ability to contribute in all phases, has been their tight end. And all of a sudden, just the biggest thing is for BYU is, as you look at this offense, without a guy like Bear Bachmeier, you have to throw the ball around. Well, you need to have guys who are able to get in kind of that short passing game and short passing down territory and make it so you can kind of have an extension of the run game via the short passing game. And that's where BYU is going to need to attack. And it's going to be interesting to see how this wide receiver core adjusts, because I know this Texas Tech defense is absolutely elite, and having guys like a David Bailey coming off the edge, guys like Jacob Rodriguez as well, prowling there at the linebacker position, it's not going to have a lot of time for a guy like Bear Bachmeier to make his decision. So the routes are going to need to be run really, really precisely and make sure that they find themselves open to give him windows to throw the ball, especially if there's no LJ Martin out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot to have a true freshman quarterback in front of what I expect to be a really hyped up crowd and with a lot of pressure in this game, as you mentioned, kind of unprecedented top 10 matchup and all that stuff. But man, that's he's put himself in this position, and we'll see what he does with it.
Well, and I also want to ask you real quick before we move along here. And the biggest thing, so BYU's rushing attack has kind of been the linchpin for their team. And I know that when we talked in the summer, you and I, we talked a lot about how the Texas Tech rushing attack took a hit with the injury. It was Joyner who ended up injuring his knee. And the question was if the rushing attack is going to come alive. Well, what they showed against Kansas State is it's alive and well. Speaking of the Red Raiders, give me just kind of walk me through how they have found this rushing prowess that they have discovered.
Yeah, as you touched on, I just was kind of curious. You're replacing Taj Brooks from last year, who was the school's all-time leading rusher. You go get this big-time portal guy in Quentin Joyner, who was originally from Houston, had some connections with the Texas Tech staff and players on the team, and he was out of USC. And then he goes down first or second week of August, and you think, "Uh-oh, here, what now?" And they liked Cam Dickey and Jacoby Williams. These were true freshmen last year that got a little bit of experience, but it's been their backfield, right? And there's really not another option or whatever, and they're very different. And you just weren't sure, did you do enough on the offensive line and development in the portal to make, because that was just a very average to below average position group for Texas Tech last year. And yet in the game in Salt Lake City, when Kansas came to town, and then obviously you touched on the Manhattan performance, they ran the ball like crazy. And 187 yards, I think it was, against Kansas State. They ran it for 340, I think, or so, maybe even 360 against Kansas. In the Utah game, it wasn't the number of yards. It was that they ran it when they wanted to, and when Utah knew they were going to run it, and they were successful with it. And it wasn't just the QB run game with Will Hammond. It was a lot of Cam Dickey. You had the one screen pass with Jacoby Williams, it was kind of a short run, and he went for like 70 yards in the first drive. And those two players have been very good. But when they've kind of struggled, they didn't really do much in the Arizona State game. They didn't, and whether it was the line or them or whatever, and there wasn't a whole lot against Oklahoma State. But granted, they scored on special teams, they scored on defense, they scored explosive passes, so you didn't really need it. You won 42-0. But it's been much better than I guess I would have thought. To your point, and I have had questions about it at different times, but I think generally speaking, it's been pretty good, and they are winning games, which is crazy to me to say this, with defense and their run game. And it's very un-Texas Tech-like, if that makes sense.
Well, we'll see how it all starts out, because it kind of feels like whoever can run the football effectively in this game might have an edge, and we'll talk about that kind of keys to the game. I also have a question. You and I discussed this also in the summer, Chris. Are we watching the two biggest brands in the Big 12 do battle on Saturday? And now we have 8 games or 9 games worth of evidence on our side. We'll revisit that topic. So we'll get to all that as we continue on in this crossover edition of Locked On Texas Tech and Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Texas Tech and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I'm Jake Hatch. He's Chris Level. All right, Chris. So you and I talked during the summer, during a crossover, we talked about the chances of BYU and Texas Tech with all the money that is being splashed around by these two respective universities when it comes to NIL, and if they were the two biggest brands in the conference. Well, if you want to go simply just by a record and what they've accomplished this season between the two, it kind of feels like the answer is yes. Do you have any different feeling on this?
I mean, I think, I don't know if anybody set out to be this.
Yeah.
I think these two institutions probably saw opportunity, and not just in football. I think that needs to be made very clear. Athletically speaking, that there's an opportunity in this league for you to take advantage of the landscape, the rules, the foresight, however you want to phrase it. And you could really emerge, because this league was searching for that. When you lose Oklahoma and Texas a few years ago, when you're trying to find, I don't know, the next brand of the blue blood or whatever we're looking for that moves the needle, people are like looking around the room going, we could be that. And I think these are two institutions that have a huge following. I think they're both well-resourced. I think that you would agree that there's a lot of alignment with your administration, your athletic department, your boosters, and it makes it pretty smooth that everybody's kind of on the same page. Not every school has this, and I think you're kind of at a major advantage when you are aligned. And I think these two schools are, and I think that you're kind of starting to see it bear some fruit a little bit here. And I don't see any reason why this changes much. There may be others that feel they can crack the code and kind of start to knock on the door a little bit, but it's early and nobody's done anything yet. But I just wonder if there's some staying power here. And again, I'm not talking just football here. We know that these two basketball teams are ranked basically in the top 10 in the preseason. You've got other sports that are ranked very high nationally on your campus. Texas Tech does as well. And I just think there's a chance here for you to kind of separate a little bit if you can keep at it and stay aligned, if you will, because you're going to stay well-resourced.
Well, and that's the thing, that alignment is exactly what you're speaking to. I think the figureheads for both these universities are they're two billionaires out there. You have Cody Campbell down there at Texas Tech. Now, he has a little more of a prominent role because he's the president of the Regents or whatever. He's the lead
chairman. Yeah, he's the chairman of the Board of Regents. Yes.
Yes. So he's got a little more power just in terms of overall, because when you sit on that board of regents, you make decisions for the university, which are obviously a big thing. BYU's figurehead is Ryan Smith, who's the owner of the Utah Jazz and the Utah Mammoth out here. And he's a billionaire in his own right and a BYU alum who's been very vocal in his support of BYU. He's made it very clear that whatever he's capable of doing to help BYU in terms of resources, he's going to give it to him as far as he's capable. And that's what Cody Campbell's message has kind of been for Tech. And to your point, the university administration, the athletic directors, the coaches, you're right. That alignment doesn't exist in a lot of places. I'm telling you, across the country, not only just in the Big 12. And with that vacuum that was kind of created with the exit of Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12, yeah, these two, and much like everybody else probably in the league said, yeah, we're capable of taking the lead in this. But the nice part is these two seem to have at least stepped forward and really thrown money where their mouth is.
Yeah, and there may be alignment in a lot of places, right? But maybe you can't do anything about it.
Fair.
That's also worth pointing out. And I know you're mentioning one individual,
Sure.
at each place, but I think there's a lot of support, financially and otherwise, around these other individuals that are also going, let's do it, whatever you need, and that's. Again, this is the way that the rules are, and I know some people hate it and wish it was the way it used to be and all the things, but I think you're doing what you can right now with the landscape. And again, there's opportunity there, and I think you're trying to kick the door in and make some noise, because there's a realistic possibility, Jake, that it would need to play out a certain way, and I think we could probably come up with some theories on how you could get to that point. But I really don't know if I see a scenario to where you can get more than one team in the college football playoff unless it's these two. Like if you get more than one, I really think it points to these two teams just because of resume and the analytics and all the things that come with it. The analytics like Utah a lot, but it's hard for me to say that the CFP would put Utah in over one of these two teams unless there's some just bad loss or something and it makes it easy on them, because you've got head-to-head wins over these two, or both of these teams have a head-to-head win over Utah. So that is also something that could be very beneficial for the league. So I don't know what Brett Yormark is sitting there rooting for on how to get to that point, but I'm sure he's got on some whiteboard going, okay, if we do this and they maybe we have a rematch and you split it, and all the things. But that's sure the way it points to me. So we'll see.
I've talked to a couple of people out there in national media. I'm sure you have as well. The kind of prevailing consensus I have heard, Chris, is that if we have two 12-1 teams in the Big 12, so essentially if BYU and Tech, they play this weekend and they play again in Arlington, and essentially they split the games. Both teams are 12-1 come that final Sunday when the playoff field is set. They don't see the any way that those two are left out. So that how it comes, how it happens, that may be the best case scenario for the league to get the two representatives into the CFP, and we'll see how it all shakes out. But that's kind of the prevailing consensus. Like I said, it's only a handful of people I've talked to so far. That's kind of the prevailing thought on that matter. Now, before we go here, Chris, give me a key or two to the game, and do you have a prediction at this point?
Well, I'll tell you what I have. We have questions and what's the recipe on how this team will win the game and all those things. My question for Texas Tech will be how they handle the QB run game. This has given them some problems. I think Avery Johnson, who's a freak athlete, gave them some problems. They settled in, and really what you learned was that was all that Kansas State really had. Once they emptied their bag of tricks and some of the misdirection, there was just nothing they could hang their hat on. And, what Texas Tech has put together on defense is you've just got playmakers at all three levels, and it's pretty interesting to watch. And it's been much better than I would have thought. And the linebackers are the ones that make it go. They just are smart. They're solid. You had 2 forced fumbles by one, a scoop and score by another, and then an interception by the other one in Manhattan, Kansas, in a big game for Texas Tech. You hadn't beat Kansas State and Manhattan, Kansas since 2008, as we mentioned. And so this was a big deal, and your defense just really showed up. And I think it was, as I think one of the TV commentators, Robert Griffin, who was on the game, he basically was like, it's basically looks like Avery Johnson versus Texas Tech right now. They just didn't have a whole lot. So my question about BYU would be, can they, and I know they're averaging 36 points a game, but can they generate enough offense to score if Texas Tech were to have a typical offensive game? The question for Texas Tech would be, can you avoid the turnovers? It's been a problem, hit and miss on occasion. They even had 2 in Manhattan. But can you run the ball when you want to? I mentioned there's been some games where you've played really well and you've been able to do that, and some games really well. Other games, not so much. So which version of that O-line and the run game are you going to get? Because I know Jack Kelly and BYU, it's just a really solid, tough defense. That's what I appreciate about Coach Sitake's team, is that it's not a team, it's a program. Mm-hmm. It's a culture. I think that you kind of plug and play. The names change, but it seems the style, the effort, the clutch component to just figure it out and continue to win. They don't play this team, and so they're not really any good, or they just barely won, or it's all smoke and mirrors. 19-2 is not smoke and mirrors. I don't care who you are. The whole point of this deal is to try to get a result. They continue to do that, and so it's been super impressive to watch. I'm curious your kind of thoughts on either side of it about what it looks like, your concerns, your questions there as well.
Well, you brought up the linebacking core for Texas Tech. I'm telling you, these 2 linebacking cores are the best in the Big 12, I think, by a good margin, if not maybe tops in the country, because with Isaiah Glasker, Jack Kelly, Asiale Acera on BYU side of things, for example, they're kind of the heart and soul of this BYU defense, which you talk about, Chris. Like, it's kind of in a way plug and play. But those 3 have just been absolutely remarkable, and they need to generate the plays to help BYU win this game, whether it's takeaways, punching a ball out, strip sack, interception. They've got to find a way to make these plays. And it's on the flip side for Tech as well. That linebacking core, you mentioned what they did against Kansas State. It kind of feels like whoever has the better day from their linebacking core, it could tilt this game in a way, because they're just so impactful in terms of that. I said it earlier. I think that whoever runs the ball most effectively probably has an edge in this game, because I really do think controlling the tempo of this, it's absolutely critical. And in BYU's case, being able to quiet the crowd down there in Lubbock, that's absolutely critical to any chance anytime you're on the road.
If LJ Martin doesn't play or is limited, what then? Who steps in? Okay. What do they do? What would be the plan B? And take me through that dynamic.
They will run Bear Bachmeier a little bit more than maybe they would have liked to. They will absolutely use his legs. He's not a burner. He's not Avery, because you mentioned Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson's got flat out speed.
Yes,
Bear's pretty quick, but he's not straight line, like going to run like a 4.3 like a guy like Avery Johnson. But he's very effective in terms of setting up his blocks and running and picking up yardage when he needs to. So
power type run game, or like Colin Klein, something like that. Yeah,
Colin Klein is the perfect example for anybody who's a Texas Tech fan. If you remember Colin Klein, what he did at Kansas State, that QB power that he ran for years, it's kind of what Bear Bachmeier is. He's just a battering ram. He's 225 pounds, and he'll come downhill on you, and he's not afraid to lower his hat and take you on head to head. Now, in terms of making it up there, I think it'd be a combination of guys like Enoch Nawahine, Preston Rex, and just try and ham and egg what you can out of the run game. I don't think it'll be the same level to what BYU would like it to be without an LJ Martin if he is limited or unavailable. But they're just going to have to make do and try and just generate it some way. And like I said, that short passing attack, Carson Ryan at tight end, for example, that's going to be the extension of the run game, where maybe some swing passes and the like. The old Mike Leach, remember how he used the swing passes as an extension of the run game? I'm telling you, the roots of what Mike Leach built in Lubbock come from BYU's history. And Aaron Roderick, he's right from that same coaching tree, and he knows exactly what it can do to help loosen up a defense. So I'm not saying it's going to be effective, or effective is the other term. It's not going to be elite if they don't have LJ Martin in the rushing attack, but they're going to have to find a way to keep Texas Tech honest just by hamming and egging it.
Okay. I mean, it's, again, interesting chess matches. And it sets up for a fun Saturday morning / afternoon in Lubbock, Texas, with the Big 12 on a huge stage. And this is what both of these teams have been playing for.
Yeah, biggest one of the season to date for the Big 12 by far. All right, Chris, if Cougar fans, if they don't already know where you guys are at, where can they find more of you guys when it comes to Texas Tech?
Yeah, obviously Locked On Texas Tech. Me and Casey Cowan chop it up every single day. And my man Jake Hatch is money as always. So you BYU fans out there, I know that your audience is massive. You don't need me to gas you up or anything like that. But it was a pleasure to be with you tonight, my man.
Absolutely. Well, Tech fans, if you want more BYU content throughout the week, check out Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcasts. It's available on YouTube as well. So as always, Chris, it's a pleasure, my man. And of course, looking forward to this one. It should be an absolutely titanic clash down there in Lubbock.
Coach Hatch, appreciate it, man. Yes, we'll talk next time.
All right. Well, for Chris, I'm Jake. As always, thank you once again for making both Locked On Texas Tech and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And make sure you subscribe, rate, and review both of these fine shows, and come back tomorrow and be an everydayer on Locked On Cougars and Locked On Texas Tech.